Nancy. Nancy Howell is a retired teacher and also retired from the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. My hero, a double retiree. You can never do too many retirements. She's been a birder since she was 8 years old and began to attend spring bird walks. In addition, she has been a volunteer with Black Swamp Bird Observatory bird banding station for over 20 years and serves as a board member of the Western Cuyahoga Audubon Society and leads many bird walks for the organization. Nancy will present a wide-ranging description of birding in our area. She will present a look at the geological history of Ohio and how it shaped the wetlands and woodlands and even the weather conditions that affect the migrants that pass through our area. She will also discuss the many species that may be seen in the northern Ohio area during migration. Nancy Howell.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction. I appreciate it a lot. First, I just wanted to say hello to a lot of folks that I recognize, names, faces, that type of thing. And secondly, I just want to give everybody a lot of hope for 2022. I know 21 was kind of a rough year for many. Hopefully people will stay as well as you can in 2022. If you can get out, do some, whether it's birding or gardening or just getting out and thinking about nature. I mean, think about it. Right now, it's early January. Bald eagles are paired up or pairing up. They're fixing up their nests. Great horned owls are pairing up. I took a walk today and I saw 3 pairs of red-tailed hawks in all different areas. So, as you're driving along somewhere and you see these red tails along the freeways, you're like, yeah, spring is going to be coming. It will be here. So really nature heals a lot. And I hope that all of you will take that a look around. All right. So Dale, am I ready to start sharing? Let me get my screen up. There we are. And as mentioned, we are going to take a look at migration through northern Ohio. And it's going to be a little different view. As mentioned, we're going to take a look at the geology of, Lake Erie and our landforms here, because of course we know that the birds had to do a little bit of changing and a little bit of evolving as the landforms changed here in northern Ohio. So again, thank you so much. All right. So either I'm only doing a little bit of the Olympics with 3 rings, or I'm highlighting different parts of northern Ohio. I know a lot of you have gone out birding, and so the orange circle represents that northwestern area, the Great Black Swamp, and the central area, this turquoise, is more or less your area. I mean, I see Lorain County right there highlighted, a little bit to the west and a little bit to the east. And then you go to the deeper blue color to the east, and that is the highland, the upland areas of Lake and Geauga and Ashtabula counties, places like that. And all those areas are quite different landform-wise because of the glaciers. Yay! Glaciers really shaped Ohio a lot. From about 2 million years ago to about 10,000 years ago, at least 3, maybe 4 or more glaciers rolled over Ohio. And, it wasn't just, ice moving in one direction. It was ice going southward, and then maybe we'd have a little interglacial period where the ice would melt back, and then it would cool down again and the ice would move forward. So it was this, I think of the glaciers like a giant emery board or a piece of sandpaper where it scrapes and scratches. And as you can see, glaciers are not tidy things. They're not all pristine and white. Maybe some of you have visited some glaciers in Alaska or Canada. And yes, some of them are very pretty, but they carry a lot of debris on the bottom as they're moving along. So again, a big giant hunk of sandpaper. So the Ohio was shaped by these glacial interactions of scraping and scratching. And then the last glacier, again, retreating and melting about 10,000 years ago. And then I really do like this slide. And again, I've highlighted those three areas. The orange area representing that great black swamp area. And I hope you'll notice that how much of the color in there is blue. That represents what's called the lake plain. That is where actually former Lake Erie, and there were lots of different names given to Lake Erie as it ebbed and flowed and rose and retreated. But that was all underwater, a shallow water, maybe a little bit like the Everglades, maybe a little bit like, who knows? We don't really know what it was like, but it was shallow. And then there were some pockets of places where the glaciers had left debris like sand or cobbles and pebbles, things of that sort. Think oak openings. You know, oak openings is a real sandy area, and it's right in this lake plain area that you would think, well, that was underwater, but again, there was lots of sand deposited in certain areas. The central part, that turquoise area, you can see is a lot less of the blue, the lake plain, and a little bit of a, I don't know what you call it, kind of an off-white, which is, again, kind of a glacial till. It's stuff left behind by the glaciers as they retreated, and that left lovely stuff like clay and maybe some sand, and so whatever was ground up under that glacier was left behind in some of those areas. And really, I want to point out Lorain County. It's almost divided into two, where you have that lake plain, where again it was underwater by of the former Lake Erie, and then that till area, that ground up glacial materials that were left behind. So you're going to have different soils, you're going to have different vegetation, and you're going to have different birds, right? And then as you head further east, those are the highland areas. You see there's very little lake plain and a lot more of the upland area. And one of the main reasons why the eastern portion was not ground down by the glaciers is because there's tougher rocks there, things like sandstones and conglomerates. To the east, where the Great Black Swamp, that's primarily limestone, which is a softer rock. So the glaciers just, ground it down really relatively easily. But in the east, the glaciers hit up against those tougher rocks, didn't really grind them down very much. As a matter of fact, the glaciers probably even moved a little bit westward because they could not move over those rock layers. So then we have, again, parts of Cuyahoga, we've got Lorain County, we've got Erie County, and places like that are, partly the lake plain and partly that glaciated material left behind, or glacial material left behind. Again, what I'm setting the stage for what's happening in the now. And again, let's take a little bit closer look. You can see again, lots of that light blue representing, again, an area called the Lake Plain out to the west. There's Lorain County, divided in approximately half by, again, former underwater Lake Erie, and then that ground up material, and then the higher ground to the east. So like I said, what did it look like when that last glacier retreated? Well, maybe out west, it looked a little bit like this, almost like the prairie pothole region where you have some pools of water, or maybe even more water than what you see here, and some lands. And so you have soggy soil, so you have different types of vegetation. Maybe it looked a little bit like, partly like the Everglades region where you have a lot of vegetation, but again, real soggy soil. I'm sure there are soil geologists. I'm sure there are geologists that have a better idea. I'm just really giving you a highlight as to what it may have looked. And it maybe have been much more of a mosaic than what you even see here. So we're going to go take a look at, again, Lorain County. The main river there, of course, the Black River, but the western section of the Cuyahoga River also comes out of Lorain County. There's a lot of tributaries that flow up into Lake Erie. And one thing I'm going to do, I hope everybody can see my arrow here. I am going to draw a line. I'm going to start where it says Mosquito Creek, and you can see how these rivers are bending. So I'm going to take my arrow, or my area, and move it along. This was pretty much the glacial boundary. So the Cuyahoga River, the Black River, the Huron River, Sandusky River, places like that, all flowing northward. And then things like you see Killbuck Creek, and I can't remember what river this one is. And then all of these others are flowing down to the Ohio River watershed. And I don't know if any of you, when you're driving along the freeway, like along 77, I can see it. There's usually a sign that says, you are entering the Ohio River watershed, or you're entering the Lake Erie watershed. And I beat my horn because I think that is such an exciting sign. Some people are like, what is wrong with this chick beeping her horn for nothing? I'm like, no, this is cool stuff. Everybody should know it. And of course, right from your website, you have these Lorain County hotspots that are wonderful places for birding. You can see everything from the north, like the Lorain Impoundment, Sandy Ridge. Not quite as far north, you have Lorain Harbor, Carlisle Reservation, Wellington, so on and so forth. And some of these areas, yes, are man-made, but a number of them are areas that were preserved from maybe former farmland and preserved now for all of us. I would be remiss if I did not mention this gentleman, Linds Jones, okay? And if Diana Steele is on our presentation here in the audience, I won't go into too much detail because I think Diana is doing some research on Linds Jones, and just some real quick bits of information on how this fits in. First of all, he taught at Oberlin College. He was the first to offer a course in ornithology in 1895. I think I took that course. Not. The Wilson Ornithological Club, which is now the Wilson Ornithological Society. Well, he was one of the founders and an editor of the Wilson Bulletin. Now, the part that's underlined, he maintained records of arrivals and departures of migrating birds. So this is cool stuff. To have records that we can go back to and find out when things were arriving. And this is late 1800s, early 1900s. So we can that's over 100 years ago. We can look back at those records and say, oh my gosh, things are arriving earlier, or wow, that species doesn't even exist in this area any longer. So again, these records are important. Now, we also organized some censuses and counts, and actually organized a census that he did 3 years before the official National Audubon Society Christmas bird counts were established. So he and his buddy, William Leon Dawson, conducted a bird census in 1897. They did a little census around downtown Oberlin. They had about, I think they went around 3/4 of a mile and used the centered on downtown Oberlin. And they had 11 species. And I do have a list of those species if you're interested. It'll be on the next slide. And then in a year later, Linds Jones and William Leon Dawson took 87 birding trips from Oberlin into Lorain County, and they tallied 175 species. So basically, he was like one of the first persons who did a big year. Well, at least in maybe the summertime or the migration season. So, and then one of them was the Buick's wren, that first county record of a Buick's wren. So really, he was really a first in, censusing and keeping track of data. And so it just really good stuff. And so, of course, keeping track of migrants. So here's the list. And like I say, 3/4 of a mile from the center of Oberlin. So he was doing urban birding, whatever urban was at that time. They only counted native species, so house sparrows was not on the list as far as tallies, but he does mention house sparrows. So keeping track of weather, location, number of species. And you can see they have downy woodpecker, horned lark, goldfinch. And in the records, he just says chickadee. He doesn't call it a black-capped chickadee, so we're assuming it's a black-capped chickadee. Pigeon hawk. I don't know if anybody knows what the pigeon hawk is. It's now the merlin. Bronze grackle, flicker. And what he does mention is that if they had counted house sparrows, there would have been at least 10,000 of them. Now, why? Well, was it because there were still horse and buggies? There was a lot of agriculture, but why they might have been hanging around Oberlin itself, I don't know. And maybe that's in the records somewhere. His notes do indicate an absence of hairy woodpecker, song sparrow, and golden crowned kinglet. So those are, I think a lot of us, when we're out doing a Christmas count or a census, we're like, oh yeah, we should get, and oh, we didn't get it. Or wow, we sure did get a lot of these, but we sure got fewer of those that we were really expecting. So again, his notes really shows that fun type of stuff that we all feel. Oops. All right, so let's get into a little bit more detail. So what is migration? Basically, it's a seasonal shifting of populations from breeding to wintering habitats. It's predictable. So you generally know when certain things are going to be coming through. And at this time of the year, here in northern Ohio, well, depending on the weather, of course, waterfowl will be moving. We know when warblers are expected to come through. We know when raptors may be moving northward or southward. So again, being predictable. And generally, the migration happens 2 times a year. So why do birds migrate? Generally, it's because their breeding habitats or the places where they're living become a little harsh, particularly with the food supply. A lot of people think, oh, it's just too cold for that. Well, yeah, it would be too cold for a tree swallow, but also there's not a whole lot of insects for a tree swallow to be feeding on. So again, really the harshness of the conditions, primarily the weather, is the main thing, and then causing the food supply to be limited. And migration is hardwired into a bird's genes over the thousands of years. So again, as those glaciers retreated, the birds that were further south are moving a little bit further northward, a little bit further northward. And so this is why Ohio is kind of interesting, because of the glaciers that were here. And, you know, what did birds do when the glaciers were here? Well, they were probably going to unglaciated areas, perhaps a little bit further to the west. Maybe they just stopped wherever the glaciers, like southern Ohio, where the glaciers were not. So again, there's just a lot of interesting things to look into when we're thinking about the landforms and migration. So when you head northward, those birds that are able to get further north, like whether northern Ohio or even further north, they have a higher breeding success than compared with tropical or wintering areas, because first of all, they don't have to compete with those tropical birds down in warmer climates. So their breeding success is much, much, much better. Now, weather, of course, plays a huge role in migration. And I think all of you who do go out, you're like, you're watching the news, you're looking at your apps, and you're trying to figure out, well, gee, you know, where should I go? What is it going to be good to see today? Well, birds will move either during the day or at night. Some of them have soaring flight, so things like raptors and vultures will move through during the day because you have the thermals, the warm air rising from the ground, and those birds can use very little energy simply by soaring, catching those thermals, and moving that way. And then you have those that use flapping flight. And yes, there are some diurnal migrants, like swallows and flycatchers, that feed on insects during the day. And but this is the flapping flight is primarily used by, again, those nocturnal migrants, warblers, thrushes, virios, kinglets, woodcock, sparrows. If any of you do pay attention to the Lights Out program, whether it's Lights Out Toledo, Lights Out Cleveland, Lights Out Akron, you do know that the people that are going downtown or picking up birds in the cities are getting, again, warblers and thrushes and virios and kinglets and sparrows, because those are the nighttime migrants. I don't know if any swallows have ever been picked up, again, from a nocturnal or a nighttime people going out for Lights Out. And of course, wind conditions during spring migration. The winds that the birds that winter further south are waiting for appropriate weather conditions. So if the winds are from the south, it helps to move them. It gives them a push. It's the tailwind. And on fall migration, winds from the north, northwest provide tailwinds, moving the birds southward. Weather fronts, you have warm fronts and cold fronts. Warm fronts that are warm air, and cold fronts, of course, bring in cool air. Warm fronts, of course, if you have a lot of birds moving on a warm front, then you're going to have a big day. Cold fronts, not quite as good. But what if you don't want to fuss with all of this weather things, you know, the winds and the weather fronts and the pressure systems? Well, maybe some of you check out this called Birdcast. And this is an awesome site. It, as it says, it bird migration forecasts in real time. It forecasts primarily the songbirds, and primarily the the nocturnal migrants. Yes, it will tell a little bit about the diurnal migrants, but so waterfowl, not as much. So if you're into watching ducks and trying to figure out when ducks are coming in, this is not quite as good. So this is really for the songbirds. And let me just give you an example. First of all, I did this screenshot from January 1st, and these little green dots are radar. And this would be an active screen. I mean, you would see the radar line moving, and you would see things pop up. So the colors here, if there's high migration, if there's a lot of birds moving, then it's going to be in a bright, almost yellowish color. If there's not as many birds moving or picked up by the radar, you can see it's more of a purplish or bluish color. So on January 1st, there wasn't a whole lot of stuff going on. There were some things happening in a little bit in Florida, a little bit along the Gulf Coast, and a little bit up to medium and even in Texas. So things were starting, but not a whole lot. Now this I took in April, and you can see this is a much more glowing sign. Now, again, a lot of movement down, and this was April 13th, 2021. So you can see there was a lot of movement in the southern states, and then not a whole lot in the northern states yet. But again, you can just pick that up and look at it every day and say, oh my gosh, look at all the stuff that's coming in, or wow, tomorrow's going to be a really good day, because you might see a brightness in Ohio. So that this is something to really watch for. Oh, and then the little blobs over in the west show precipitation, and so that'll also help you make a decision if you want to go out. If there's blobs all over here, you may not want to go out because it may be raining heavily. All right, another one of the things that sometimes people think about are things called the Flyway Systems. And this is primarily for waterfowl or birds that follow water courses. It was developed, again, for migratory water birds, so that those, especially Fish and Wildlife Services, Division of Wildlife, they could have sections where waterfowl and water birds can go. This really does not fit for raptors. It really does not fit for the songbirds either. But so if you are, again, into watching rails, cranes, waterfowl of all kinds, you notice where Ohio is. It's considered in the Mississippi Flyway. Of course, the Mississippi River is off to the west. But look at Lake Erie. That's considered the Atlantic Flyway. So we're kind of at a crossroads in this situation in northern Ohio. So if you get some winds from the west, it may blow some of those waterfowl in over Lake Erie, and hey, you have a wonderful waterfowl experience. If you get some northern or nor'easter winds and they're moving birds, especially waterfowl, from the Atlantic Flyway, hey, Lake Erie could be a really hopping place. So again, it's there's just a lot of things that we can view in northern Ohio. All right. So let's take a look at a few of the migratory species and the different habitats they need, whether it's a wetland or a wooded area bordered by wetlands or rivers or the lake. And we'll get a better understanding how the topography really plays a role in these birds' migration paths. All right, so tundra swans. I don't know how many people saw tundra swans this past fall. I had not seen any or heard any going over, but first of all, look at where they nest. They are truly tundra species. Look at that, the northern part of Alaska, the northern part of Canada. And then all the yellow is migratory route. And look at where they're headed. They're headed right through the Great Lakes region and to the coastline, the East Coast, Virginia, Carolinas. So again, the Great Lakes are a wonderful place for tundra swans to be seen, to fly over, to utilize. But if the weather up north is not going to be pushing them down, they may not move quite as much as what we expect. And I think that this is critical when you look at records from before, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and look at records now. What is moving? What is not moving? What's moving later, earlier? Blue-winged teal, that's one of my favorite ducks. That's why I threw it in here. You can see that they breed in this northern Ohio area, which is wonderful. But they have a really quite extensive breeding range. And then winter, really not too far, further south, Florida, the Louisiana and Gulf Coast, Texas, places like that, but all the way into Central America. So they do quite a bit of moving. I like blue-winged teal. And of course, for those who do love waterfowl, just wanted to toss in some eye candy here with, whether it's diving ducks like the scalp and the redheads and canvasback, goldeneye, or the dabbling species like American widgeon, wood duck, pintail, northern shoveler, mallard. This is a good time of the year to begin looking at waterfowl because they're in their finest plumage. They are pairing up or are paired up already. And just like this goldeneye that's up in the kind of the central photo here, he's displaying to a female. He's throwing his head back and making probably some odd noises. You wouldn't really think it's a duck. But it's really fun to watch the waterfowl because they're really looking nice now and they're looking for a mate. For those who like to find some rails, yep, Virginia rails are here again using our northern Ohio region. They tend to migrate out of here, although people do sometimes get them in places like the Cuyahoga Valley and some of the other wetland areas, and then head down into the Gulf states, Mexico, Florida, places like that. Now, shorebirds, we don't have as much shorebird habitat, certainly around the Cleveland area. We wish we did. I haven't spent a whole lot of time along the Lorain County shorelines, but certainly the further west you go to places like Ottawa and McGee, there you get a lot of shorebirds. And really, I think the shorebirds do like that western portion, mostly because, again, there's such a diversity of wet areas. Oh, let's not forget some of the agricultural lands in Lorain County, too, where some of those flooded fields, you can get some interesting shorebirds, maybe not everything like you see in this photo or these photos where you have ruddy turnstone and the black-bellied plover and buff-breasted plovers and the little semi-palmated sandpiper or semi-palmated plover in the middle. And again, some more eye candy here with the yellow legs and avocets and dunlin and godwits and dowitchers. So again, the western basin, the western part of the migratory routes really favor the shorebirds, and of course, a lot of those habitats out in the western side are managed for shorebirds. Of course, birds of prey like osprey, well, they'll nest here, as you can see, breeding area, but they also go way up into Alaska, and they will migrate through Ohio. Some will winter and spend year-round in the southern states. However, juvenile juvenile osprey, young of the year, actually head down to South America and spend a bit of time there, and then make their way back a couple years later. So it's really, again, kind of a fun bird to watch when you're thinking about how much area they cover, and where they go in the winter and when they come back in the spring or summer. Broadwing hawk, probably haven't seen a whole lot. They're really pretty hard to find. Yes, I do see a few, Cuyahoga Valley, and of course they will migrate around Lake Erie because raptors are diurnal migrants, and they do not want to cross water. So they will follow lake shores, the shorelines, and again, use those thermals. And broadwinged hawks can form pretty good sized flocks or kettles as they're swirling around in those thermals. But I hope you'll notice that not a whole lot of them hang around in the contiguous 48 states. Yeah, there's a few that may hang around in southern Florida, but look at, they're heading down into Central America. So they do vacate the area, at least the lower 48. Another one of the diurnal or daytime flyers, the chimney swift. And of course, they have to fly during the day because they are insect eaters. Putting up chimney swift towers, as you probably have in some of your parks in Lorain County and certain areas, are very beneficial. I hope you'll notice something on the map here. You see their breeding range. You see their migration range. Notice there is no wintering range. Well, it's not shown on the map because they head down to places, for way far down south in South America, Peru, Argentina, places like that. Wow, what a migration. Think about those poor little birds moving their wings a zillion times a day, and having to feed on insects the whole way through. Similarly, the swallows, again, are insectivores, aerial insectivores, and very much like the chimney swift, purple martins, again, nesting in the area, migrating through. Those birds that move from a little bit further north migrate through and then spend their winters in South America. Again, Peru primarily. Banding records show where these birds do hang out a lot. And I just wanted to toss in a few more of the swallow species that you might be familiar with, things like the tree swallow and barn swallow, bank and northern rough-winged swallow. Similarly, flycatchers, aerial insectivores, and migrating during the daytime. So things like the phoebe, great-crested flycatcher, eastern kingbird, and what is that, a least flycatcher possibly? Again, you're not going to find them for deceased that have struck buildings at night. These are daytime flyers. They need the insects. Wait a minute, this is not a bird? Aha, You know why? Because these are two really, really, really important tree species. Oak trees, the one on the left, and those long things that are dangling down, those are the male flowers. And then the female flower is that little tiny thing right in there. That's what the acorn is going to form into. But oaks are important and willows are important. So if you are planting plants in your yard or doing a planting in a park system, try to get oaks in there, try to get willows. When they come into bloom, these new leaves, these catkins, these new little growth areas are great for caterpillars, little tiny caterpillars. But remember, if you're a warbler, if you're a kinglet, you're right there. You see those things and you are feeding on them heavily. So these are great, 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 great trees to put in. So you have to think about the plants that are in the area too. All righty, so now we're beginning to get into the birds that we really want to see once spring starts coming, and even fall too. So you have virios again in our area. Northern Ohio, primarily forested areas. This is the yellow-throated vireo. But again, please do note where it spends the winter. That's the non-breeding area. Ooh, wood thrushes. Ooh, we love wood thrushes. We love hearing them sing. We love seeing them. And again, really a forest species. So yes, you may get them a little bit along the lakefront areas if there's forests for them, but they do like a much deeper forest with some understory. And again, take a look at where they spend their breeding area and where they spend their winter or non-breeding area. Sparrows, Lincoln sparrow, one of my favorite sparrows, heading a little bit further to the north of us, coming through on migration, whether it's spring or fall. Again, remember, migration is generally 2 times a year, so you got to provide that migratory habitat for them all year round, especially in the spring and in the fall. And they don't go too far south. Their non-breeding area is, again, the southern tier of states. Rusty blackbirds. Here's a bird that's overlooked a lot. And it is one of my favorite blackbirds, heading up into the boreal forest, even into the Arctic tundra areas, using a little bit of Ohio for migration, and then non-breeding. And they will hang around. You may get them on your Christmas bird counts in certain regions. They do like wetland areas. So just like the photo shows, they will walk around in water. They just are really a very nice, I like them a lot. They're just a really beautiful little blackbird. Oh, look at these horrible pictures. Oh my goodness gracious. These are the ones, of course, we love to see, not only springtime, but also in the fall. It's a little bit more challenging in the fall. But it's wonderful to have this eye candy that we can really enjoy. I know a lot of people go out to McGee and Ottawa to see the warblers moving through, but I'll bet you've got some really great places around Lorraine that they move through as well. One place here in Cuyahoga County that I happen to enjoy is the Cleveland Lakefront Nature Preserve. It's okay in the spring, but it's actually pretty darn good in the fall. So again, if you're up to the fall warbler challenge, come to the Cleveland Lakefront Nature Preserve. They are they're really just fun to watch and fun to identify. And I think a lot of you know or are familiar with the Blackpole Warbler and its migratory path. Again, breeding up in, well, as far as Alaska, up in the Canadian boreal forest. But look at Ohio. it looks like every single Blackpole Warbler cuts through Ohio. Okay, well, maybe not every single one, but Ohio is a really important place for them to feed, to fatten up, especially on fall migration. And then a number of them, as you can see, they go off the East Coast and fly over the Atlantic Ocean and wind up in the northern part of South America. Wow. I mean, again, we're talking about birds that are just using their wings. They're burning out the fats that they've built up. So all these areas that we can provide for them in northern Ohio for them to refuel is very important. Rose-breasted grosbeak, see them in the summer, spring, summer, and then they spend their winters down in Central and South America. Similarly, indigo bunting. Alrighty, so I hope you had enough of those birds, that eye candy, as I like to put in those slides. But remember, just to go birding around your county. Remember how important this northern Ohio area is for migratory species. Do bird censusing. Go and do eBird. This is all important stuff. So here's some of our folks that are out on field trips through Western Cuyahoga Audubon. And I want to thank the Black River Audubon chapter for the invitation, all of the members and guests who joined this evening, longtime birders, new birders, and of course, we also have to thank the birds themselves. Thank you.